You're recording now?
You told me we got a baby.
Jared, you're recording, you'll just edit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello. Hey,
I know the year. It's 2016. What's the date today? Do you know, Mom?
The third.
Yeah.
13th? No, tomorrow's the 13th.
Okay.
Today's the 12th.
Tomorrow's the 13th.
Yeah, today's the
Okay.
12th
Of what?
of March.
March. March the 12th, not 2016 is the date today. Sunday.
Yeah. Yeah,
And we
so
all went to mass this morning,
okay.
and Jared did too.
Oh, you cornered Jared into going?
Oh yeah, Jared went too.
Oh, well, that's
I packed Sunday clothes because I knew I was going to be going to Sunday.
He knew he was going to be going to mass.
He asked what time y'all went to bed. I didn't know what time y'all normally went to bed. I said y'all are usually pretty late, though.
Actually, we've started going to bed earlier since he's been feeling so bad.
Yeah,
He got out of that habit of 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning.
yeah.
Like,
So what, 10 o'clock or so?
you don't want to cut 'em out.
Sometimes it's 9.
Yeah,
Just depends. But tonight we stayed up because we knew he
And
was
then you're in
coming.
the shot.
yeah.
248 when
You're
I
in the
started.
shot.
Where's that paper that you were?
Oh, you need
Without
to?
exercise.
Well, that's more for you.
Tough.
Yeah, I'm not gonna know what to
But if my knees get better, I'm gonna try to walk.
It's just odds and ends to get
Oh,
you
that's
to
your
talk like
that's
that.
that's your you
It's
know.
not like question and answer. It's like
I know.
Okay, so question number 1.
Okay, what is that?
No, he wanted to get the date and the time just to know.
When this was done.
Yeah.
Okay, we got the
And
date
then
down. huh?
and then so I'm 53. I'm gonna be 54 in November. And then how old are you right now?
I'm 79. I'll be 80 in December.
Okay.
And Pop keeps telling me you're almost 80. I said not yet.
You well, let's see.
And I found out that my school that I graduated from high school, Reagan High School
Yeah.
in the Heights, Barry called me and told me they're going to change the name because it's, I guess, from the Revolutionary something. I don't know who it was named after, but evidently. And so they're going to change the name, but he didn't know what it was going to be. But
Oh,
Reagan has been there for probably almost 100 years, I would imagine. And they're going to change the name. I said, golly.
So you were
So I graduated from Reagan in 1955.
but you were born in Anderson
Uh-huh.
and then moved to Houston when? What?
I was probably about 4 years old. Kind of like we moved, like your dad and I moved over here. Because I started school in Houston.
Yeah.
And I think Uncle Bubba did too. I don't think he was going to school yet. He's 2 years older than I am.
Okay.
But yeah, actually, we lived around Houston Avenue. And I went to St. Joseph's School there through about the 4th grade or something like that. And then, because I made my first communion and all there.
Yeah.
And then Mom and Dad bought the house on 8th and a half, and we moved over there. But I was still going to school. Bubba and I were still going. We'd go down to Studewood, catch the bus, and ride it down to Yale Street and get off. There was quite a few of them in the Heights that were still doing that.
I bet that place looked a lot different than what we remember it back then, huh?
Yes. So we did, continue going to school even after Mom and Dad bought that house and moved over there. Then we switched to All Saints, and I went through the 8th grade there. It was Catholic school, so I went through 8th grade there, and then I had to go to junior high, 9th grade. Then from the 9th grade, it was a separate school. Then I went on to Reagan High School.
Yeah, okay.
The junior high was called Hogg Junior High.
Yeah.
After,
You're a hog or
Yeah.
I'm a hog?
well, that's the sisters,
Yeah.
but it was.
I was named after the dad?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what you know it's coming. How did you and Dad meet?
Well, there was this young couple living in the garage in the duplex apartment right next door to us on the corner. Bob and Alice Rowland. And he was in the Air Force, and he was stationed at Ellington. But he lived off base. So, but sometimes when they'd have an argument, he'd stay on base, you know, and he got to know Jerry and Bob Taggart and some of the guys there. So he'd invite him to come out on weekends. Nobody wanted to stay on the base on weekends, so he'd invite him to come out there, and they'd fiddle around with cars and stuff like that. Although your daddy didn't have a car at that time. So Alice decided that she was gonna, she said, I'm gonna get a blind date set up for you. And, but she, out of all of the boys, she liked Jerry the best. For one thing, he was Catholic. And she just said she liked him better of all those boys that came out, you know. So she arranged a blind date. One weekend we were gonna go on a picnic. And so Dad was coming in from off base, and he didn't have a way to get there. So this girl that he had gone out with a few times drove up to the house with him. And I happened to be on the porch, on our porch, when he drove up, and she let him off. And Alice said, oh, what happened now? So for most of the day, I wouldn't talk to him. We went on a picnic and all that, but I didn't want to talk to him, you know.
No cake.
Oh, yeah, you couldn't have, she didn't want to give you a piece of cake because. So
He had messed up.
That's kind of how we met. And then we started dating. But we dated for a while, and I don't know, I just decided I didn't care for that too much. So we quit dating. But he had made friends with Bubba. So he'd call Bubba every once in a while and want to know what I was doing. Bubba would tell him.
Yeah.
And then somehow or another we got back together, and then the year I was to graduate for Christmas, he gave me my engagement ring. And then when I graduated in June, well, in September we got married.
Yeah.
So that was kind of how that went.
Huh. So y'all got married and stayed in Houston.
He was still stationed at Ellington, but he could live off base when he was married
Okay.
because he had enough rank, I think, enough stripes, huh? And but then, and as soon as I graduated from high school too, we were married. But I started working at the bank, at a bank downtown. But then, about 8 months before his tour of duty was to be up in 4 years, he was transferred to Savannah, Georgia. But I could move there with him because, like I said, he had enough rank for me to.
Oh, okay.
So we moved to Savannah, and they kept trying to get him to re-enlist and all this, but he didn't want to. Dad wanted to get out. He just decided it wasn't for him. They even offered him an extra stripe to stay in, but he didn't want to. So he got his discharge, and we drove back to Houston. Well, we stopped over here in Pierre Part, but we were on our way to Houston. And little did I know at the time that I was pregnant, because I had a miserable trip home. And I had a abscess tooth besides, and I thought that's what was making me so sick. But I was pregnant with Debbie.
Yeah.
We had been married 2 years already by that time. And I was pregnant with Debbie, and then we did stay in Houston. Dad got a job, and we stayed there for a while, but he always wanted to move back to Pierre Part.
Yeah.
So Larry was also born in Houston. But then when Debbie was 4 and Larry was 2, Daddy decided he was going to open a lawnmower and all kinds of shop over here in Pierre Part. His mom and dad had the property, so he was going to put him up a shop over here and do repair work on motors and different things like that. So that's what we did. January of
62.
62.
Okay. Then 4.
And then we lived with his mom and dad for about 9 months, I guess. And while and then after a while, my dad came and Jerry, and they started building the house here. But in the meantime, I had gotten pregnant again, and you were born, Gary, in '62. In fact, when I went to the little hospital out here that Dr. Pelche had, and he's the one that delivered you, Debbie's birthday was that day. And you were 5. Weren't you?
Debbie was 5, yeah.
Debbie was 5. And so I left a present with Mama and all. We were still living over there. And I had a cake and all that. So I said, well, be sure Debbie has, her birthday present and a cake and all. Because I think we went early that morning over here. But you were born later that evening on the same date. And just a few minutes difference in the time that Debbie was born in Houston.
Yeah.
So, Dad, Dr. Pelche, was sitting in his office drinking coffee because Ella wasn't there. Ella was there when Barry was born. But they were sitting in the office drinking coffee because he told me I still had a while to go. And so, anyways, I was thinking, no, it wasn't with you. It was with Barry that this happened. But anyways, you were born here in Pierpont at the little hospital.
Well, while we're on the subject of me, what was I like as a small child?
If I took you any place, I had to keep my eye on you. Because you wanted to know how everything was put together. I mean, anywhere you go, you'd pick up everything. You wouldn't break it, but you want to look at everything. You wanted to know how everything was put together. And growing up, too, Dad used to change the oil and do everything on his cars himself pretty much, too. And in those days, you could because you kind of knew how everything was, And Dad said sometimes when he'd be under the car doing something, he said, your face was closer to the thing than his was. You always wanted to know what everything looked like and how it worked. You were always curious about everything.
Yeah.
So, but you were a good boy. I mean, and then when you were 3 years later, Barry was born. We moved into this house actually. You weren't even 6 weeks old when we moved in here, but we didn't even have all the walls inside the house finished. We had a couple of bedrooms done, and but we still had we had the the framework done, but didn't have the house completely finished. But anyways, we moved in over here and.
Yeah, so I was born in '62, and Barry in '66. 4 years later, yeah.
Yeah, Barry was born September the 1st, and our anniversary was September the 3rd.
Yeah.
Which was number 6.
I can't talk, do I?
Well,
anyway.
Back to my younger years, I guess.
Okay.
So what does anything stick in your mind that other than the wanting to play with everything, that was there anything in particular that I was, like my grades and things, were they okay? I remember, most of the later years in school, but I don't remember the early years, was there things?
Yeah, you were very good in school. Actually, though, you followed Debbie and Larry, and sometimes the teachers in Pierpont, they do like I do sometimes, get the names confused, and sometimes they call you Larry or something.
Yeah.
And because y'all look so much alike. but you told him, well, that's okay, just so you don't call me Debbie.
Now, in between my first and second grade, when I was 6, I remember certain things about the operation and the cancer that I went through. But I wanted to hear your side of the story from that.
You always had problems with your tonsils and all that. It looks like you were always getting a sore throat or something or another. And but Peltier over here, he didn't believe in taking the kids' tonsils out unless it was absolutely necessary. So in first grade, I took you to the doctor quite a bit, to him quite a bit. So eventually he came to he decided, he said, okay. He said, this kid, I guess, is going to have his tonsils taken out. So he said, when school is out in the summer vacation, we're going to take his tonsils out. Tonsils and adenoids. We set a time and all that, and we went to, but before that, we knew you were going to have your tonsils taken out. But we went to Oregon to visit with a friend that was in the Air Force with Daddy in Savannah. And we went to the Pacific Ocean and walking around, and it was so cold and all. And you were the one that you had to piddle in everything. So you had to walk in the water and all. You wanted to see how cold it was. Well, what did you do? You fell in. Got yourself all wet.
What I can remember of that was I was walking out there on stones that were above the water, and the tide must have been coming in, because I remember next thing I know, I'm in up to my knees and then trying to find my way back, and the next thing I know, I'm up to my waist. I don't know if the tide was that fast or I was just getting nervous, but I remember that.
Yeah. So we had to go to Walmart and buy you some dry clothes, because it was a good ways back to Ray's house, and we didn't want you to catch a cold or something like that. But when Dr. Peltier decided that you needed to have your tonsils taken out, well, you and I went to Donaldsonville. You were going to go the night before and spend the night and have your tonsils taken out the next morning and then come back that afternoon. Well, Mama kept Barry, and the other two were in school, of course. No, they were all here. That's right. That was summer vacation. So we went to the hospital, and they just started the thing of taking chest x-rays to admit you to the hospital. They didn't used to do that. So they took a chest x-ray, and you and I were just sitting there and waiting. And the hospital administrator walked in. He started talking to us, and talking with you. And then he told me, he said, Miss Landry, he said, I don't know. He said, I don't want you to get too alarmed about this. But he said, his chest x-ray showed a little something on it, and we're not sure exactly what it is. So we're going to have Dr. Peltier run over here and take a look and decide what he wants to do, if he wants to admit you and go ahead with the tonsillectomy or what. But it wasn't Peltier that was going to do it. It was another doctor coming in from Baton Rouge. So he called, and I sat there and waited, and I wasn't too concerned or too alarmed until Dr. Peltier walked in, but your daddy was right behind him, and he was on duty at the time. He was in his uniform. So that kind of shook me up a little bit. But Dr. Peltier used to ride with Daddy once in a while, and they knew each other really good. Both of their names was Jerry. Mm-hmm. So he said, well, come on, let's go see what this x-ray looks like. So we all, he took us in there too, Dad and me, and even you went. And he said, well, I don't know what this is, but he said, I think we better wait and let somebody else take a look at it. So you came back home. You and I came back home that night. And then a few days later, he had made an appointment with Dr. Paige Acree in Baton Rouge, who was a cancer specialist in all this. And so Dad was working at the time all the time, so you and I drove over there to Baton Rouge, went to see Dr. Acree. You got in his office, and he had a heart and all, the put that you could take apart and put together and all. So what do? You walk up to his desk and you start taking the heart apart and all this other kind of stuff. And I started to say, he said, no. He said, let him do. And you put it back together. So then we started talking, and he had seen the X-ray, and he said, I don't know either what it is, but he said, I think we need to take a look at it. And he said, when you and your husband decide, give me a call and we'll make arrangements for the hospital. I said, well, Dr. Peltier had prepared us and said that it would probably have to be exploratory surgery. So we're ready whenever you are. So he said, okay. He said, I'll have my nurse give you a call whenever we get the operating room and all this other stuff set up, and so we can do this. So I don't remember exactly. It was a couple of weeks later, I guess, that you went to Baton Rouge General.
Mm-hmm.
And so they did, and your Aunt Pat, Uncle Bubba's wife,
Mm-hmm.
and they had gone to Alabama to see her mother and dad, and they were on their way back, so they stopped here. So Aunt Pat stayed here with the other kids, and Uncle Bubba and Daddy and I went to the hospital the morning you were supposed to have your surgery. So we were sitting there waiting, and the doctor had told us it would probably take maybe 10, 12 hours for the surgery. Well, it was only about 5 hours later, and they told us that you were in recovery room. So I said, oh, well, it must not have been anything much because it didn't take as long as they thought. So they said the doctor will be out to talk to you in a few minutes. Well, he come down out of the elevator, and we were in that waiting room where the patients wait. The parents and everybody wait, just for people that are having surgery. And he started talking to us. He said, he had something in his back, but he said it wasn't attached to his lungs or anything like that. But he said, I removed everything, and he said, I think I got everything that the human eye could possibly see. And Dad asked him, he said, was it malignant? And he said, yes. I thought I would pass out. That's not anything I expected to hear at all. So then we waited a few hours because you were still in recovery, and then when they sent you back to your room, they said, now be sure that you don't let him lay too still for a long time. He needs to move a little bit. Well, we had a hard time keeping you in the dang bed. You wanted to get up and go everywhere. Because I stayed all night with you that night, and Dad came back home. And then I called Grandma and Pop in Houston, and when I told them that the doctor said it was malignant, well, they decided they would come over and stay a few days. So they drove in from Houston. Uncle Bubba and Aunt Pat had to leave to go back. They were living in Houston at the time, too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how that went. Now, it was a few years later before we actually found out the name of the cancer. I think he told us, but it just didn't register. It was neuroblastoma, which is a childhood disease, and usually when you have that, you don't survive it because they don't usually find it until it's too late.
Yeah.
But you did have to go through some X-ray. They called it X-ray therapy in that day. I guess
Yeah.
it was
Well, it's radiation treatment,
Radiation,
probably,
yeah.
yeah.
Where you had to go 5 days a week for a month, I think. I had to go back and forth with you to Baton Rouge 5 days a week for your radiation.
Yeah, I remember that.
And the only thing you had to do was stay in the house all summer. You couldn't get out in the sun. But you could do anything you wanted to do. And by the time school started again for second grade, you were ready to go.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you
I
had no
remember
side effects of it. I had to kind of try to hold you down some because it didn't, even the radiation, the X-ray stuff didn't. You'd walk in there and all these people sitting on the benches, waiting to take their treatments and all, and they'd see you coming in here, a little 6-year-old, and they'd look at you, and they'd ask me, what, you know, and I said, well, he has to take X-ray therapy, you know, and when you had finished your therapy, the nurse had to she gave you some little cars because she thought you was such a.
Somebody gave him a wallet too.
Every couple of weeks, they'd have to do a blood test. And you'd go in there and sit down, and as long as the nurse would show you how long the needle was, it was okay. Don't try to take his blood without showing him the needle. It could be foot long as you saw it. I couldn't even look. But you
Yeah.
never said a word. They couldn't get over that.
Well,
So,
let's fast forward a little bit. What was school like later in the years for me? You think? Let's see. I went to Pierrepart till 8th grade, and then I went and started in the band.
then they started they had a junior high, kind of like they did with me at that time when you were.
Yeah.
The 9th grade was in Napoleonville, and then you went to Assumption High after that. You started in FFA in the 9th grade, I think.
Yeah, and I remember, you participating a lot with the
I used to
field trips and the band trips
I used to chaperone a lot, yeah.
and all that. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I chaperoned for y'all a lot, and yeah.
Yeah. So,
I do remember one time in high school, though. You came home from school at the usual time on the bus, but you had to tell me, Mama, I've been suspended for 2 days. Oh, why is this? It was something about a class you were in, and the teacher was passing out rulers for y'all to use, and she gave you yours, and some other boy grabbed it from you. So you went and grabbed it back from him.
yeah. Yeah, I remember
Got
that.
into a hassle, so they suspended both of you.
Oh, that was cool. That was like 10th grade, I think.
So the next day, I had to go to school to talk to the principal. That was the routine, you know. But I said, you're going to be at home, but you're not going to be sitting here or playing. You had to clean all the windows around the house. You had to wash all my windows, inside and out.
Yeah.
And when I came back, they were all clean too. But when I got over there, talked to the principal, he said, you had to come in, but he said, your boy's a fine young man. He said, it just that because of what happened, both of you had to be suspended. So, I mean, he didn't even give me a sermon or nothing like that, you know. I just had to go over there and then come back.
Yeah.
And like I said, when I got back, my windows were clean too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so I remember being real involved in FFA, Future Farmers Association stuff.
we remember when you made the
national band.
and you were in 9th grade,
I think it was
and you were going to,
going to Kansas City, Missouri.
because they were having the national convention there, and you were one of them that was picked to be in the national band. And there was only 2 of you from Louisiana, huh?
Yeah, it was usually 2 from each state.
And you had to fly there. And here you were at your young age, and you were going over there. We didn't know what to think, but we let you go. And y'all did great. The president happened to have been there at that time. It was President
Ford.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And was in the same hotel where y'all were at the time.
Yeah. It was a pretty interesting time. Yeah, and then from high school off to college. And band, of course, was always a big thing in high school, and band in college. And,
Yeah, right.
you know,
right.
it seemed that, before we left high school, Laura and I started dating.
Then y'all kind of broke up for a time, though.
Yeah,
that was after you got to Nichols. So.
Yeah, our first year at Nichols, I think. After our first year, I think we broke up for most of the
And
second
everybody kept
year.
telling you, well, Gary, you were pretty upset. And everybody kept telling you, well, if it's supposed to be, it's gonna work out. Well, I don't know. No, you were kind of upset.
Yeah.
But then some way or another, y'all got back together.
Yeah.
Then y'all ended up getting married.
Yeah. Married almost 19 years. Yeah.
Actually, y'all got married a year after Larry and Carol got. Debbie and Rocky got married, and then Larry and Carol got married 6 months later. But you and Laura waited a year before after them before
Yeah.
y'all got married. So it gave us a little bit of a slack there, but
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then so we got married, and then we were living in a trailer in the yard here,
right.
pretty much a little trailer house.
Mm-hmm.
And then we bought the place in Morgan City.
Mm-hmm.
How did that make y'all feel? Did you feel like we were leaving? Because Debbie moved away before that, but it seems different for the son to
But Larry was still living here too.
yeah.
And then y'all moved away. It kind of felt that way. Laura was into the thing with that TV station
Yeah.
at the time. She was working for them. That's why y'all decided to move to Morgan City,
Yeah.
because she was doing work for them. Was she a camera person or something like that?
Well, first she started. Her and the guy that owned the cable company decided to start the station. So she really was station manager and producer and everything all in one at one point, And then as they hired more people, she became the manager, and then the other people started doing more of the camera operation and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you go back to your career change. You wanted to go to work out of college.
You're gonna have your chance.
No.
No,
Yeah.
we're gonna talk later.
Now.
Oh,
Then after she decided to leave, was it Cox?
no, it was Allen's TV.
Allen's
cable.
TV cable.
Yeah.
Well, then that's when y'all moved to Houma.
Well, we moved from.
Oh, you
Morgan
moved
City
from Morgan
back
City
to
back to
Pierrepont.
Pierrepont and lived in Laura's
Yeah.
grandpa's house for a while.
But it was before we moved back to Pierrepont that she found out that she had Hodgkin's the first time.
right.
she
I
was
remember her
23.
coming one time and she had these knots in her neck. And she was concerned about them. And she asked me about that. She said, feel this. And I did. And she said, what do you think that is? I said, oh, I don't know. But I said, did you talk to the doctor about it? And she said, yes, but he wants me to wait and see.
Yeah, I remember
And
that first
I
doctor
said,
we talked
oh,
to.
I don't know. She said, I think I'm going to push him a bit. So she did push for him to find out what it was. And then they did find out that it was Hodgkin's disease. So,
Yeah, we wound up going to get a second opinion, and the second opinion was Dr. Bolot, and Dr. Bolot was familiar with Hodgkin's disease because his nurse had gone through it just a year before,
okay.
and so she knew exactly, So he said, "Well, look, let's go ahead and take it out and test it." He says because it's not a big procedure, and so he had her, his nurse, I can't remember her name, but had her talk with us a good bit first, because Dr. Bolot, I think, was pretty sure before he even took it out what it was going to be. And so she had done radiation treatment that first time, and
And she
And-
did go to what was it, Dr. Farmer or something? And he advised y'all against her ever having children, being she'd had the radiation and had the Hodgkin's and all this. But
well, Dr. Farmer was a surgeon, and then
that
our
removed-
oncologist was Dr. Militello. Now
Okay.
he told us, he said that we should wait 5 years, and then he says if everything's good in 5 years, we should try. And then that's what we did. We waited the 5 years, and in that 5 years, we had already moved back to Pierrepont and was living in Mr. Rudolph's old house. Mr. Rudolph had passed away, Laura's grandpa, and we lived in the house about a bay.
And she was teaching. Laura transferred. She was already teaching at the time then.
Yeah,
After she left the TV station, she started teaching.
she taught in Pierrepont for 2 years, I think.
That's why y'all kind of moved
And
here
then when
because
we moved to Houma, she started teaching in Houma. Yeah, so we bought the land and built the barn and lived in the barn for a couple of years. And it was in that time, right before that Jared was born. Jared was born in April 28th of '92, and we moved to Houma in September or August of '92. So he was born right before that. Yeah, so that was big for us. We were all excited, and when we were living in the barn, it was 6 months. Probably had been in the barn about 5 months, 4 or 5 months. Jared was about 6 or 7 months old when we got the call that on her last test they had showed the cancer had come back.
the Hodgkin's disease was back.
Yeah. And as rough as the treatments were on her the first time, the second time she had vowed that she was not going to let it get to her like it did the first time. And it didn't.
But at that same time that she had to go through this, her mother was bitten by something or another, and she almost lost her leg.
Yeah, we figured it was a spider, so I'm not sure.
Isabel was going through a really hard time too, and here was Laura with the small baby and having to go through treatments again too. So it was pretty hard.
Yeah.
For both of them, for her and
for
Isabel. And
I was still working 7 and 7, you know, a rotational where I was not home half the time then.
but,
I think I was able to transfer to a job to be home every night by the time Jared was probably 2.
But then Laura would get sick so often in between. You know, I mean, she'd have so many things going on with her
Yeah.
that she went through.
She had some bouts of things.
Quite a few.
She wasn't sickly all the time, but there was some issues, and then in 2002, February 19th, 2002 was when we lost her, and it was she had been cancer free for 6 years by then, and it was a bacterial infection we had found out.
She came home from school and was felt very, very bad. I remember you saying.
Yeah.
And she told Jared that she was going to go lie down, and when you came home, you would fix, him something.
Yeah, I talked to her on the way home, and she said, pick up something for Jared for supper because she didn't feel like cooking. So I did, and then about 7:30, we decided, let's go to the hospital. Let's just go to the emergency room. We weren't concerned. We didn't think it was anything. We thought it was just another bout of possibly pneumonia that she had dealt with several times before. And
I remember you calling me and Dad in the middle of the night and told us that Laura was at the hospital, but not to be too concerned, but we decided, well, we're going to go over. And so we said, well, we're going to get up and get dressed. And we hadn't left home yet. And you called me back and said, Mom, Laura's gone. It was such a shock. It was really hard on Laura's daddy because just the day before he had buried his brother.
Yeah.
His brother had passed away. And he had gone to his brother's funeral. And then here he is losing his daughter.
Yeah, that would be Uncle Peter that had passed away right now.
And it was very, very hard on him. And then Isabel still wasn't doing too well either.
Yeah.
So she didn't even get to come to the hospital with him. So it was a pretty rough time there. Now, they had Laura's y'all had Laura's wake at the church,
Yeah.
in the church itself, and they had people from all over because she taught school, and there were so many teachers that knew her and liked her, and she was so well liked by everybody. And they just had people come from all over to pay their respects.
Yeah, I remember being amazed at how many people were there.
Mhm. And I remember that you stood up. They had her laid out in right below the altar, like they do, and you stood there, and Dad went and stayed with you. To, the people would come up and offer their condolences and all. But the thing that got to everybody was the day of the funeral. Jarrett was one of them. He was, about 9 years old? 8 or 9?
Yeah, he was 9.
And he got up and did a eulogy to her. And there wasn't a dry eye in that church, I don't think. Everybody was crying
Yeah.
when he did that. They could not get over. It was something. It was.
Yeah. Yeah, so that she'll be missed. So from there, so it was just me and Jared for a couple of years, and stayed living where I was at, and we stayed in the house.
And along came Jones.
So, so next is I started dating Mary, and I was just curious about y'all feelings on, Mary, and then because it'd been just a year or so since Laura had passed, and I don't I know y'all knew Mary before, or Mary Beth as everyone
Yeah,
referred
Mary
to
Beth.
her.
Yeah, everybody. Sometimes we still call her Mary Beth. Yeah, we knew Mary, and everybody liked her. When anybody that would meet her would like her.
We still like her.
And but we knew she had the 3 sons. Y'all went together how long before y'all decided then that y'all would?
A little over a year before we decided to get married, and so we got married. It was about 2 years after we had started dating.
Then, of course, Mary moved to Ahoma. She had a home of her own, but y'all decided that she would move to Ahoma in your house.
That was not a decision made lightly, that's for sure.
And then
then
there were
sure
4.
that she wanted to pick
4
up the
boys,
boys,
and well, I can remember that Josh at the time, he was they were kind of upset to leave their school too, the boys.
yeah.
Pop remembers one time though, when after they moved in and all that, and Jarrett came one time. Pop, how did he say that? You don't know the hell I go through. And Pop says, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Jonathan is something." But that's like that with all kids, though, even natural brothers, because I know you and your brothers used to squabble, and and Debbie and all of them. So it was kind of natural, but to him it was different because he was so used to being the only one, And then all of a sudden he's got these other 3 boys in the house.
Yeah.
Oh, Pop, you don't know the hell. And Pop told him, he said, "Oh, Jared," he said, "things will be okay." He said, "y'all will get along." He said, "There's going to be times when y'all are going to squabble and all, but things are going to go okay."
Yeah, because it wasn't always quiet over here when me and Larry and Barry were
No,
little,
it wasn't.
and even Debbie.
No. That's what Pop told them. He said, even natural brothers and all this, they don't always get along either. But like I said, Jarrett was so used to being himself, being the only one.
I knew it'd be tough for him going from only child to one of 4 kids, you know.
And boys at that, you know, no
Yeah,
girls
oh yeah,
in there.
and being the youngest of the 4, which I'm sure
Right.
was.
But one thing though, they were all considerate of him. They let him have his own room.
Yeah,
He didn't have to share with any of the other 3 boys. They, Jared and Jonathan kind of bunked together, and I think Josh had his own room, but they they left Jared to have his own,
yeah.
left him his room. So,
You gotta give Jones credit. Also.
but no, you ask how we felt about Mary. We always felt that you were very good to her boys, but at the same time, Mary was just as much of, tried to be just as much of a mother to, not a mother, but I mean, she looked at Jared like she tried to look at her own boys, and she was just as good to him as you were to her son. So
Yeah.
this wasn't a marriage where there was that conflict going on, you know, between one didn't like the other's kids or something like that. That never didn't seem like to anybody. They never saw any of that, to where there was anything like that going on. So that was
Yeah.
one thing we were grateful for, you know. And so we thought Mary was just as, you know, did just as much for Jared as you tried to do for her boys. So that's one thing we've always been grateful for.
Yeah. When Laura and I had decided to move to Houma, did that bother y'all? That you know, all the way in Houma? It turned out we wound up a quarter mile or so from Debbie's house, but that wasn't always planned. But it worked out pretty
No,
well.
things like that didn't bother us too much where y'all moved or whatever, because y'all was still around. It's Barry that moved all over the states. That,
Oh yeah.
you know, that's what was a little harder, but still, it's not for us to do this because, well, we did the same thing. We moved away from my mom and dad, and it was kind of hard for them because it was just Bubba and I, and Bubba by that time had moved to North Carolina, so mom and dad kind of got left over there by themselves, you know.
Yeah.
So it was pretty hard on them. But for us, we, you know, y'all were around and everybody still kept in touch. Y'all have always been close, all 4 of y'all. So
Yeah.
that's one thing that we've always been grateful for.
Well, we touched a little bit on your mom and dad. What more can you tell us about? Tell me about them. Maybe some things that I don't know from your early years.
As I said, I was born in Anderson, and Dad was a son of his dad was a blacksmith in Richards, Texas. That's how he made his living. And he had, I think there was 7 or 8 kids too. And Mom was about 7 or 8 in her family, but her dad had property around Anderson, and he raised cotton. He was a cotton farmer.
Mm-hmm.
So when Mom and Dad got married, they moved on to Grandpa's property where there was a house available and all there too, and he started raising cotton. Dad started planting cotton. But you had to walk behind a plow with a mule and all this other kind of horse, you know. Didn't have tractors and all in those days yet. And so they stayed there for a couple of years, a few years. And one year the cotton crop was so bad that they hardly made anything, so Dad decided that they would move away. Well, we moved to Magnolia, Texas first because Dad had some brothers that were working there. It was a sawmill thing. Magnolia, Texas was a sawmill town. I don't know exactly. I don't think we stayed there too long before we eventually moved on to Houston. And but during the war, I remember that somehow or another, Dad started out as working with steel and all this kind of stuff. He became he was an apprentice, I guess, and he learned to weld.
The war, you're talking about World War II,
In World War II, yeah. But then he went to work in the shipyards, and that's how I think how he learned to weld and all this. It was during the war. He wasn't drafted, but he worked in the shipyards. And Dad could not read or write, but he can add. He knew how to count money. He knew how to read a ruler and things like that, but yet he could not read or write.
Yeah.
And then after the war, then he went to work for a place called Alamo Iron Works. They made things for bridges and stuff like that. All kinds of iron stuff they did, and he welded and all this. And he worked there for a number of years until he finally retired. He retired at age 62.
Okay. I remember he loved to fish.
Yeah, he loved to fish. He'd come over here, and Dad and him would push the boat out just in the back of the house in the bayou, and go down the bayou and go fishing. They'd catch a ice chest full of fish. He loved to fish. And Mom, well, she actually went to school to second or third grade or something like that, and she could read and write. She wasn't, a whiz, but she could read and write, and she handled all the money and all the bills and all that. She knew how to do all of that. And they ended up buying the house there in Houston and paid it off and all that. But in their later years, well, that's when Dad had a heart attack. But he survived that. And then a few years later, he contracted colon cancer. So he was going to have to go for treatments and all this stuff. So we brought him here, and I would take him, I think it was about 3 times a week. I had to take him to Baton Rouge, to Oxnard's, that was on Oxnard's in Baton Rouge.
Yeah.
And in fact, he stayed here then. Mama didn't come over here though. She stayed in Houston. She didn't like the idea of moving over here. Dad had always wanted to move over here and stay here, but she never did want that. So, but when we brought him here because I couldn't go and stay over there, and they had no one to bring him back and forth for his treatments.
Yeah.
And I had you 4 kids and all this over here, so that's why we brought him over here. And I searched around for a doctor where he could take the chemo and stuff with that would accept Medicare and stuff, because they told me I had to be very careful about that because some doctors would not take Medicare patients and all this. So anyways, he took the chemo and all this, but it was about 6 months, I guess, 6 or 7 months that he lived. And I remember he used to have Debbie's bedroom over there. And one night, he was feeling really bad, and he told Jerry that he didn't feel good, and he didn't feel like staying in the bed. He was hurting a lot. So Jerry says, well, let's walk up in the living room, and we didn't have this living room. Yes, we did. We had built this. Mm-hmm. Yes, we did.
Yeah.
So he said, well, let's go in the living room, and you can sit in the recliner or lay down on the sofa or something.
That was in 1992. The reason I remember that is because Jared was an infant, and we were staying at Donna and Rusty's house one night because Mr. Bill was going through open heart surgery. He was going through bypass surgery.
Mm-hmm.
And Debbie had called me over there to tell me that Grandpa had passed. So I remember all that happening at the same time. So do you remember what the date was on that? It was closer. It was in the summer, I think.
Let's see.
Okay,
May
beginning.
the 31st, because Kathy's birthday is June the 31st, and he died exactly a month before.
Yeah.
That's how I remember.
Yeah. So
May
Jared was
31st.
just the 4 months old then. 4 weeks old.
I don't think he was he baptized yet? Because something or another, something held up his baptism.
Yeah, I don't think he had yet. I think that might have been.
All of that going on.
Yeah.
But anyways, the night that Pop died, he said he didn't want to stay in his bed, so we walked him down the hall. And Debbie wasn't here at the time, but she decided to come spend the night, so kind of relieve me a little bit maybe. So we walked down the hall, and he told us, he said, "I'm not going to live till morning." And I said, "Oh, Dad, you're going to be fine." So he came and sat in the living room here, and Jerry sat in the recliner with him, and he stayed in here with him. And by that time, Debbie had come, so they told me to go lie down for a while. And I don't know why, but I went and lay down in my clothes. I didn't put my pajamas on or anything. I don't know why, and I've never done that. But I went to bed like that,
Yeah.
and a few hours later, they came and told me that Dad had passed.
You
He
mentioned.
died here in our living room.
You mentioned that he kind of predicted it, which we mentioned Mr. Rudolph, Laura's grandpa, earlier, and there was just something I wanted to interject, is that he was feeling bad while they were putting together a St. Joseph altar in Napoleonville. So Miss Isabel came to me and asked me, "Can you go run my dad to Baton Rouge to his doctor?" Because we didn't think it would be anything major, but he just wasn't feeling good. So we brought him there. They wound up admitting him, and the altar was on the Sunday. So the Monday, we went to see him, and I remember being in the room, and Father Burns had come see him too. And Father Burns was talking off to the side with somebody, and the guy that he was talking to, probably Mr. Bill, asked him, "Well, what you doing Saturday?" And he says, "Oh, I'm doing this Saturday." And Mr. Rudolph said, "Wait a minute." He says, "You can't plan anything for Saturday." He says, "Saturday you'll be burying me." And
It's funny.
and
how
we all laughed about it. And Saturday we buried Mr. Rudolph.
It's strange how they get that feeling sometimes, that they're
Yeah.
gonna,
Well,
that's the early years about everything going on. As far as Mama Landry,
How about your mama?
my mother,
You didn't do your mama, you did daddy.
well, after Dad died, Mom stayed in Houston another 2 years, I think. But then she started developing Alzheimer's, and the lady next door called and told me one time that we needed to come see about Mom because she didn't seem like she was doing too well. So we went over there, and we could tell things weren't going right. So, but we came back home, and we talked about it a lot. And Jerry decided, he said, "You've got to move your mama over here."
She was over here.
That's right. We brought her back with us. We brought Mom back with us over here. And we were going to keep her a week or two. And Dad decided, he said, we're going to have to move her over here. And I said, "Oh, gosh, that's going to be hard because she's always said she didn't want to leave Houston. She wanted to stay at home." She always fussed about that so much. So one day he decided, no, that's it. We're going over there. We're going to take her back, and we're going to go move her over here. Well, we were standing over there on the steps right there. And he told her that she was going to have to move over here. Oh, I am not moving over here. You cannot make me move over here. And Dad said, well, he said, you can tell me whatever you want to, but my foot is down. You are moving here. I know you don't want to, but you have to. And he said, that's the end of it. Well, nobody said any more, but we got all you kids together, and y'all decided to go out and help us out and all that. And 2 or 3 days later, we did. We went and we moved her over here.
Yeah, I remember. It
And
was a
she
pretty
moved
quick
into the apartment over there where Larry and Carol had lived when they first got married, the first 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so we moved Mom into the apartment over there. And she stayed there. Had her about 10 years here. But till at the last few months before she died, had taken her to the doctor for something or another. And the doctor looked at me, and he told your daddy, and he told me, he said, you're going to have to put her in a nursing home. And I said, oh, I can't do that. He said, if you don't, he said, you're going to be gone before she is. Because it was getting to me so bad. And so we did. We put her in a nursing home, and 3 months later she was gone. That really got to me, because I thought, well, 3 months we could have kept, but we had no way of knowing this. Everybody tells me that. You had no way of knowing that she... I don't know.
We never know when these
So-
things happen.
But that's what happened. 3 months after she was in the nursing home, she died. But we had her here for about 10 years.
Yeah.
She died at age 90. Dad was 78 when he passed away. And your mama and papa on the other side, on your dad's side, papa was 78 when he passed away too. He had colon cancer. But mama passed away 12 days before her 104th birthday,
Yeah.
which was, she died August the 24th of what year?
September.
September, yeah. Because her birthday would have been in October. She died September the 24th.
Yeah.
She's been dead 2 years now.
Is there, to close this up, is there any anything in particular you remember about me as a child that, besides the taking things apart, or
We found out things now sometimes when y'all talk and y'all laugh together. We found out about the time when y'all as boys, y'all Daddy would put hay in the barn because there was a few cows around here or something, and found out that Daddy lost what was it, a wrench,
tape measure.
a tape measure or something,
Yeah, he know
and couldn't find it. And years later, he found it in the hay.
it. And he hit Larry over the head with a hammer.
Yeah.
Daddy,
He
I
threw
told
it
you
at
you're
him.
gonna get your chance.
Threw it at him. Yeah. And Larry had to have some stitches. Oh, but you also, when you were young, as I said, you always liked to see how everything was made. Well, they had a tractor, one of those tractors that you'd pedal like a bicycle,
Yeah.
and you turned it upside down, and you were pedaling it because you wanted to see how the wheel would turn. You stuck your fingers in there and almost cut off your finger.
Yeah. It's pretty crooked still. Yeah.
Yeah. So you had to go and have stitches and all done for that. So it's the usual things with kids growing up.
Well, we good? That was an hour, wasn't it?
Oh Lord.
Oh,
yes.
Mama, you did good. I mean, I didn't have to prompt you for much. I mean, you.
So we started with her.
Huh?
That's how we started with her.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my goodness. You gonna get me out of here now?
Well, at least the stories you told are accurate, because that's the ones I've heard before.
Sunplug.
So they must be true.
Yeah, sunplug at the bottom.
Okay, who's next? Pop?
Yeah, we're